All right, welcome to another episode of the Power Comics Book Club. I am Evan here, joined by Benjamin Marra. What's up, man?
Not much. How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. Oh man. So for this week, our assignment was to look into this comic. Man, holy shit! Doctor Leviathan. I think absolutely one of the craziest comics I've ever read. I still don't
Super
get it.
bonkers. Yeah,
Super
crazy.
bonkers.
Yeah, super bonkers.
James Matthew Banks Jr. Now, one thing about this is Power Comics, we tend to focus our attention on the 1980s. That's where most of, that's where the good golden era is, I think, of Power Comics, right? Sometimes we creep up into the 90s, but never, seldom, rare occasion do we look at the 2000s. And Dr. Leviathan is actually from 2005, which I think adds a whole other layer of insanity to it, does it not?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when I looked at this, I totally thought it was from the late 80s or early 1990s.
Totally.
I didn't think that it was from the 2000s in any way whatsoever. And it only was when I read the letter in the back, which is par for the course, really, with a lot of power comics. There's my cat.
Oh, yeah. Perfect timing.
uh, yeah, only when I read the letter in the back did I realize that it's from 2005, and I was shook.
Yeah, it's definitely something we should spend some time on, like going deep on. Is that letter in the back? Because a lot of these a lot of the forewords and afterwords that you see from these power comic creators, they really do kind of that's where you get the tiniest glimpse into what was going on behind the scenes in the making of this. Where's the state of mind and all that stuff? And I have to say that this one in this comic might be the most alluring, the most holy fucking shit out of all of them.
Yeah, it actually poses more questions than it answers. So
Totally. But I think it's safe to say, without giving it away, that even though this was published in 2005, I think it is definitely mentally transported, pretty seamlessly from the 80s into 2005. Like this whatever ideation this man had, it was conceived in a certain time, and it was frozen in that moment, and then perfectly, I think, like marinated until 2005, until it hatched, essentially, out of like a egg filled with centipedes.
yeah, that's a great observation. Actually, that's exactly how it reads. It's like a time warp, that yeah started in the late 80s and landed in the mid aughts.
Here we are. So for anyone, if there's anyone out there who's randomly clicking on the internet and stumbled across this review of Dr. Leviathan, there's probably zero of you. But if you don't know what we're doing, we are looking at rare, obscure outsider comics from the 80s, 90s, now 2005, and where we post the full issue on patreon.com/powercomics, and then Ben and I come together a little while after that, after releasing these issues, and we decide which ones we should cover for sort of a weekly book club. And this one I decided, I don't know if I should be sorry or not, or thankful, but that we're doing Dr. Leviathan, and then we're going to be here to unpack it. So on youtube.com, so which I'm very excited about. Something the creators behind this book never probably would have imagined would
Probably
be
not.
right now. But
No.
anyway, let's do it. Without further ado, let's crack open this fucking goddamn horror show. And immediately out of the gate, we are assaulted by... Now, this is something I wanted to ask you right off the bat. Looking at this and looking at this issue, which drug do you think James Matthew Banks Jr. was on when he did this?
Right. So I am not experienced or heavily experienced in drugs. So it's difficult for me to assign a specific drug experience to this, but I'd have to
Okay.
say bath salts would be, I would say, if
Maybe
they
he
were
waited
around in
until
2005.
he waited until bath salts were a thing before he decided to make this comic book. No, I mean, when I looked at this, I immediately was like, glue, fucking paint, aerosols, dusters. Like, this is like when I looked at this, honestly, the first time I remember just being like, "Whoa, this is some drug. This is a bummer trip. This is this is this is someone having not a good time." Like honestly, like when I looked at this, and obviously, we'll get into it a little here, but let me just show you that the first couple of pages of this comic book is nothing but a cacophony of tormented, rejected Hellraiser Cenobite people staring at you, the reader, and inviting you in to this world. It's this incredible preamble of all these characters. And when I first saw this, I was like, yo, definitely like paint or glue, but also this idea of like, this like I had a guy I went to high school with where it's like, he did an art project after he was in a car accident, that
Whoa.
kind of changed him, and then like stayed up for like days. So this to me looks like post car accident, staying up for like 6 days, huff some paint, and then let's get down to business. But I don't know, man. This to me is amazing, and I love it. Just to be full transparent.
Yeah, it's incredible stuff. I mean, the thing that like totally blows my mind is just the amount of characters that are
Oh,
on display and how different they are, how unique they are. All of the designs are super interesting and unto themselves and so unique. But they still feel like they're of the same
yeah.
world, like the Cenobites are all sort of that Hellraiser like world that Barker created. These feel like they have that kind of same they have that same kind of feel.
Yeah,
The one
yeah, yeah.
the one thing
And
though about these things though is I can't tell sometimes where one character starts and another begins. It's almost like
yeah.
a maze trying to just looking at all the lines on the page. There's no sort of like clear depth of field or
No, that's very true. The
there's
perspective, there's no perspective, which I think again to me reads as drugs. Like he's tweaking. He's just like
right.
going off. It's like
Yeah.
you start with one line. He probably never picked up the pen here
Right.
once.
Yeah.
It's just all like or the pencil. Maybe he started it and then like like a week later he's like, all right, I'm gonna ink this fucker, and then
Right.
like and then he did, but like to me it's like it's insane because to me and again I'm not the artist here, but like these characters are so each one is so well thought out. I mean
Yeah.
you have like double like you have like screaming like separated face dude, you have like this munching man over here, like double face trippy guy here. This whole thing, like all of these could be like have their own comics or their own world, and
Totally.
yet now it's like, well, this is just the cold open, man. This is the
Yeah.
preamble.
Right. Yeah. He has got so many design ideas and he has got so many that he can just throw them away. Like these are just like, background characters basically.
Totally. And then so first we had to just comment on that, like get that out of the way because But then let's go through a little bit here, that we're sort of seeing this, this narration, which is already setting the tone from the top. Your body trembles from their hateful stares that cut through you like a hot knife through butter. That's the first thing. So man, this is just so tormented already and demented. Hateful stares coming from a room full of psychopathic killers. Okay, so they're killers, okay, and mass murderers, killers and mass murderers, who possess enough power to level great cities or crush vast mountain ranges into dust. And the idea of crushing and destroying cities is not what I would have thought about with these guys.
No.
Like what they'd be doing,
Or
but
like mass murderers really
yeah,
either because they look like
these are
super
fucking
villain.
nightmares. These are
Yeah, they look
nightmare
like
figures. These are
exactly. They don't
hell
look like
figures.
somebody living in a basement that's going to be like,
Yeah.
a serial killer or something
These
like
aren't
that.
people
It's
you're
really
gonna
weird.
like convict in like a court of law.
No, exactly.
Like and
Yes.
and of course we're gonna see that is of course where James Matthew Banks Jr.'s head is at the time, where we're this a courtroom will make an appearance in this comic book. Anyway, so we introduce this very ominous narration here, kind of building up the anxiety, dread, and intensity of these characters staring at you, like I said, the reader, which is super effective. And then we basically get, once we've introduced all these people, I love this too, like the flaming head with the chest face. This might be my favorite dude right here, actually.
He's really
But
good.
really good. But God, I can't believe this is 2005. Like, what was
I know.
happening in 2005? Like, this is crazy.
I don't even
Anyway,
remember.
I don't even remember either. Certainly wasn't this. So then we see that the focus is now on this little girl. And then now we have the episode, or the episode, I keep saying that, the issue title, The Evil That Men Do. And holy shit, man. So all of these, now we're sort of seeing some perspective that these characters are circling her, right? And that's what's going on. But
Yeah, it's scary.
so when I sent you this and I was like, yo, we're doing Dr. Leviathan, and you get to this point, like, what are you thinking? How are you feeling about this, like, art wise and story wise at this point? Like, are you just like shitting your pants, or what's going on?
Art wise, I'm like, this is some obsessive drawing. And like a lot of power comics, it has that quality of like kind of you know, somebody doodling in a notebook, just getting down their thoughts in like a really amateurish way, but in the
Right.
best possible amateurish way. So thankful that we get a chance to witness this stuff.
Oh my
Um,
God. Yeah.
yeah, but just that it's got this weird kind of demented teenage horror scenario where like you're just building up the villainy, all focused on this little girl, the most like vulnerable sort of representation of like somebody, so of a victim.
Yeah.
It's this weird sort of like scale of dominance, and it's just very, very disturbing, but at the same time so perfect
So
for
perfect.
for
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
power comic.
Totally, totally, totally. So moving on here, after the ominous cold open, man, we are again pedal to the metal into this world where this insane looking vein popped scorpion homeboy with a rib cage back protector is bustling out of the crowd. Speaking in third person, his name is Hassan, by the way, which is also just what? That's his name. So Hassan cannot wait. Hassan must taste. And by this point, I'm like, this is demented. And this is coming from some really crazy deranged place. And then here, this is amazing too. I actually do like this choice here of seeing her perspective, looking at it. Pretty amazing. Pretty accomplished there. And then and so then like this guy wants to eat this little girl, but then like the other Cenobites. I mean, I suppose we should touch on that too. Like we both, I think you and I thought the same thing. Like we thought Hellraiser right off the bat with this
Totally.
thing.
Yeah.
So then I'm gonna call them Cenobites. I don't give a shit. So the Cenobites then kind of step in to protect this little girl, and then we kind of move on to let's see. Yeah, and then everyone starts arguing. Well, like, why can Hassan have all the fun? I want to have a piece of this, her and all this stuff. And it's just like, what is going on? And then now we're seeing the introduction of the main villain of this story, who is goes by the name Siege, a character here who's smoking a cigarette, who is totally freely okay with centipedes burrowing in his various orifices here, and and is just man, this is so crazy that this is the world that we're inhabiting here.
What's weird is Siege is he's just dressed in like a suit and tie, and like smoking a cigarette, and like the weirdest thing about him is he's got these centipedes like crawling in and out of his face and stuff, and he's like the most pedestrian design of all the villains.
Totally.
Like all the rest of them are like super baroque, like opulent sort of decorative designs, and yet he's like relatively simple, but he's also the most compelling. Like I really want to find out more about Siege and what his story is.
Yeah, and notice here too the way that he's introduced, which I think just also just speaks to the mind of James Matthew Banks Jr. is like the idea that we start in on this close up of his veiny scalp as a centipede is breaking through the skin and crawling out here, and he's just like, yeah, and like that's how we're introduced to this fucking character. Yeah, bummer trip. I'm saying it on record. This guy's having just a bummer trip, and this was drawn in like like a single afternoon. Like I can just picture blankets being like put up in front of all the windows.
Totally.
Like no outside world.
He's like blasting like 9 Inch Nails or like some
Yeah.
kind of like industrial techno metal like
Or like
I don't know,
some
like
record that he's
Sugar or something.
yeah that or just like some record that he has at half speed that's just something like like Tiffany slowed down half speed and it's just like fucking yeah this guy's we got to get him on the show. Anyway, moving on. Siege, damn you, say something. So now everyone's urging like Siege to intervene into what's happening with this little girl. And now we get the backstory from the author here. His name is Siege. He is a practitioner. I love how specific this is. He is a practitioner of the black arts of magic and is the world's 12th most powerful sorcerer. And somewhere underneath James Matthew Banks Jr.'s mattress is a list of 1 through 11 as well.
Right. Yeah, I want to know who those guys are too.
Yeah, he's got it figured out. Just crazy here too, the perspective, and just like you were saying earlier, you don't know where one thing stops and starts, and it's so easy to get like this is so hard to read and to follow. It's like you're just like holy shit, this has this it evokes such an insane feeling, right? Like off the top.
Another pillar of Power Comics is like the indecipherability of the story. It's like that it probably makes sense to the creator, but they don't necessarily have all the skills to communicate
no
story like very effectively, which is great because it gives it this odd sort of reading experience.
Totally. So moving on, he is one of the most feared men in the world and the leader of these notorious criminals who are called the Lynchmen. These are the Lynchmen. Unless it's some really clever like David Lynch reference or something, which I highly doubt, but
yeah, like I mean, it could be. Who knows? The
Lynchmen. God, just all of these insane thighs here is just nuts. Okay, then of course more insanity. This is the year so specific, 3099. So 1,000 years better than any of the 2099 saga.
Right.
Siege and his small army of vicious criminals have maimed and murdered over 3 million people. So these guys have killed 3 million people.
Damn.
Around the world. So, okay, wow, these are some bad dudes. Siege, I'll pay you any amount of money. I'll be your hostage. So now we're kind of learning that there is some grounded human character who is attempting to get the attention of Siege. Presumably somebody who is the father or related to this little girl here. So now every nation's leaders cringe at the mention of his name. As their law enforcement cannot stop him, no jail can hold him. So he's this bad motherfucker. Just tell me what you want. Please tell me. So now he's just mulling it over again as centipedes eat away at his scalp. Unreal, right? Like I don't even know.
Super crazy. I mean, this is. I think this is the part where the comic started to spiral into the fog of confusion for me. I was just like, I don't know who's talking.
Wait, that started here? Sorry.
Yeah, it starts almost immediately, but this is really where I just sort of felt the G-forces of, total confusion overwhelming me. It was, I just didn't know what was happening, but you just kind of are along for the ride, and it's a good one.
Oh, absolutely. So, wait a minute. This is incredible, and I had a visual cue ready. Maybe I'll pop it up in the edit here. But this made me pop. This made me laugh. The first line of dialogue out of Siege is, name's Judge Reinhold.
Right.
So his name is Judge Reinhold? What? There's a Judge Reinhold reference.
Yeah, it's
That is a
super odd.
what? I mean, I know it's not the same spelling,
Right.
but I mean, maybe he's just not aware of who Judge Reinhold is.
Maybe.
But what I want you to do is try to remember a few names. So just so crazy. So then basically what we have, Judge Reinhold. It's unbelievable.
It just takes you out of the story, and just the my memory of Judge Reinhold, the actor's face, enters my
I
mind,
know.
and I'm just like immediately bounced out of the comic and like in this other sort of space. It's really weird.
Totally. And then now he lists a bunch of names, and then oh no, well here's their real names. He's listing people's real names, and then saying, oh, but you might know them by Golik the Giant and Riddick the Mind Slayer, and you'll remember Voltek the Executioner, and that's who all these people are. So maybe at one point they were normal humans, and now they've become part of the Lynchmen crew. And then it's revealed that Judge Reinhold had convicted all these guys at one point, and now they're becoming Cenobites. I mean, that's the way I looked into it. He's like, here, like, remember Jake Holloway? Now he's Voltek the Executioner, and this is what you did to him when you convicted him, and this is why we've taken this little girl hostage. That's kind of what's going on. So there is a story.
Okay.
Yep, and then it's just he's just doing a very bad job at telling you who's speaking. Like right here, he has two, Judge Reinhold and C just overlapped, and you don't know who's talking. And then he's like, and then this monologue, you don't know who's saying it either, because it's saying I convicted who, but it is Judge Reinhold. I convicted those animals for the murder of over 23,000 innocent people, so now a very specific number, in Clark City. What happened to Clark City was a tragedy. And then, yeah, so that's what I think is going on here. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what's happening. And then moving on, now we're getting into just even more perspective, like disorientation, I feel like, with this comic, as now we're seeing one of his Cenobite guys who's now just this giant who's like eating people, and now I'm so confused here because I don't know how big or tall these people are supposed to be. And then here's this dude who's like, making buildings look small. I don't know, man. Now I'm just like, holy, I don't want what he's having.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I felt the same way. Like you just are you like meant to then assign the same like scale to the guys from the first few pages? Like are these all huge, giant city destroyers? And they are listed as people who could, fell skyscrapers and turn mountains to dust, very easily. So you're like, oh, well, maybe they are super giant, like overlords.
Yeah, which is just like, it's hard to comprehend. It's hard to visualize this. He's on another level.
It is on another level.
Yeah, it really is. So then it says here again, have to just smile. Judge Reinhold grimaces as he remembers how those three beasts went on a bloody rampage through Clark City and how hundreds of innocent people were eaten alive by Golik the Giant. He remembers the news reports of those carnage and how thousands died and tens of thousands were left maimed or crippled that day as Siege's men raped and pillaged a defenseless city. Again, no motive, just aimless. Everything's nothing has a motive in this world.
No.
Bugs are just burrowing, and in people's skin, and everything's evasive. And oh man, this is just there's real trauma behind this. I'm sorry, this is deeply disturbing to me, but I love it at the same time.
It's terrific.
It is terrific. It's one of a kind. Moving on, this is again the density is ramping up here, where and then now Siege is kind of like sort of trying to make an excuse for all of it, saying, well, I told him to do one thing, but then he kind of took crime into his own hands and killed tens of thousands of people, and then he's kind of trying to justify it. Like, what can I expect from a lunatic who murdered his own father and then raped both his mother and older sister before he electrified them? So then he talks about electrifying people, which is just what? I don't know how many people fried that day. Now we're talking about like electrocuting people, and like faces are opening up and like zapping people. Like, this is madness, man.
That's a really great sequence. But again, like, I'm not really sure what the sense of scale is. Like, I think that's the same giant guy. Did
This
he?
guy.
Yeah, right. So he's a giant, but then did he find another giant woman to try to kiss here, or is she a normal sized woman that he's just then shrunk down? Like, is he like a giant man
I
type
don't
powered
know.
like supervillain, or I don't know. But I do like that sequence where he leans in for the kiss and then
Yeah.
completely fries her somehow.
Somehow that, yeah, again, I like how we don't know why. I mean, most of the stuff we don't know why, but yeah, it's
That's like really solid storytelling though, just moment to moment
just like
panel.
yeah,
Yeah,
I love it. Yeah, it's amazing. Um, and yeah, so then he describes more victims, more torment, more pain. And then of course this is kind of a thing we see a lot is the fingers in the mouth thing. He likes that. There's a fixation with that kind of a concept. I feel like we see here a lot. And I just love how he's just shoveling people in his mouth. He can't just just like just like eating just handfuls of people. Jesus Christ.
amazing.
Amazing. And then here we go. And then now it's like, and then it looks like yeah. This perspective makes no sense over here. This here makes no sense because over here
Right,
he's much smaller than Golik.
right,
Um, yeah, totally disorienting. And then I guess he's trying to stop him from doing what he's doing and smashes him with the side. A building hits the side of his head here.
okay, yeah,
I mean, I don't know,
yeah. It
man.
does.
You tell me.
For me, I was just sort of like you just let go of the wheel and you just
Yeah,
kind of are like,
yeah,
let's see what happens. I don't even think I was trying to kind of follow it at this point. I was just sort of
yeah. Letting it wash
absorbing the
over.
words and like
Mhm.
just marveling at the draftsmanship.
Totally. Which maybe we should just give in at this point. But one thing to note here is that this is the amazing courtroom scene I was talking about, where he's got kind of the his own Cenobite interpretation of like Hannibal Lecter here, which I love.
So great.
So great. And then now Judge Reinhold is laying down the law here. God, I hope that was a conscious decision to call him Judge Reinhold. And then he makes an example out of him, and then now finally we hear why this is why we kidnapped your lovely daughter Jessica and Carlos. Carlos, this is just Carlos. Carlos is here to help us. And so Carlos looks like, oh, he's the real bad motherfucker, the real unassuming guy who's going to come in again, super penisy haircut here, which is another
Yeah,
common Power Comics trope, and he's
no
going to come
doubt.
in and yeah, and really cause some mayhem. I love C's just sucking on the cigarette too, right? Like such a good little detail for
It's
whatever the hell
great.
was going through his mind.
Yeah,
And
he
then
does a good job with it.
totally. And then he describes who Carlos is. He's also known to the rest of the world as Dr. Stygian, the butcher from Brazil. So he's Brazilian. And he was Mad Riddick's lover. So that's interesting. You know,
Yeah,
that there's this, sort of gay relationship happening here between these
it's a nice
characters.
detail.
That's a nice interesting detail.
Yeah,
Um and then now, this is weighing on his conscience. Like, don't you do this? Judge Reinhold is pleading. You took something very precious from me. And then, of course, now we see, like, holy shit, Carlos is fucking nuts because his head fucking splits open, of course, revealing an insectile being underneath his face. Because why the fuck not in Dr. Leviathan world, right?
of course. Yeah,
God, unreal.
like of course, there's an insectoid, monster living inside this guy's face.
Yeah,
Of course.
yeah, of course. Unbelievable. And then now he's getting closer to Jessica. That's her name now, right? Yep.
I think so.
Dripping, and going crazy here, and this is just absolutely insane. And now it's weighing heavily on Siege here as we're seeing, and he just bites her frickin' face off, man. I mean, that's what's happening here, right?
I think so. This is an odd choice, and this is something that in comics is a weird move, and it's influenced by cinema, I think. But
Oh,
in film, a lot of the times you can't show what's happening that's
true.
really horrific on camera because maybe you have resources that are restricted, or
Totally.
budgetary constraints and things like that. But in a comic, you don't necessarily have that problem. You can draw whatever you want, so why put anything off panel? But unless you want it to sort of live in the imagination of the reader, I guess, which is kind of like the same thing with the film.
I mean, he wants to haunt your fucking mind, I think, with this. But
Right.
to your point, I totally get it.
But at the same time, he's already been so detailed with so many other things and so many horrific moments that I don't know why he would spare us this one.
It's a line he didn't want to cross here.
I don't know. I think maybe he thought it might be more effective or something to put it off panel, but I disagree. I would really love to see a huge splash page of this. This kill move going down. So
I think I know the reason why. Which is coming here. I don't want to bury the lead, but I think I know the reason why. But I totally agree with you that his depiction of that, maybe he couldn't draw it, or I don't know, but that definitely. I mean, I'm sure he could have in some crazy way, but he can draw literally anything else. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. This is great though. All the cuts to what I'm guessing Judge Reinhold's horror as he's seeing it happen, and him crying, screaming. Then of Carlos, is here. Oh my God. It's absolutely insane. And then, Carlos gets thanked for his good work. Now I got to get back to some business. Nothing big, just a little human sacrifice. I'll be back tomorrow, so please keep chaos down to a low roar. Can you guys keep down your burrowing insectile fucking nightmare shit down to a reasonable volume. And while I'm away, Dr. Stygian is in charge until I get back. Okay, cool. Then his face, I love that, where he's just as my face is coming back together.
Goes back together.
Ridiculous. But then the little girl's not going down so well, and he's starting to feel, oh, something's happening here, right? This is not good. And he's starting to feel coughing, and then all something's going on, and then, are you okay? Stige? I like how they shorten his name. Stige? You okay, man?
It's a nickname.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, she explodes from inside him in one piece. Which is maybe why he didn't show it, because that's what I was thinking, because there's a double turn here.
Right.
Double cross.
Right.
And this is insane too. Imagine how a snake must feel when he discovers that the mouse is now hunting him. Imagine how the spider must feel when he realizes that he's being hunted by the fly. This is the type of shit when he's going through the grocery store and fucking picking up shit and buying shit. This is what he's thinking about.
Yeah, he's I gotta write that down.
Yeah.
It's a perfect line.
Unreal. So that's what's happening here. And then this is really where now it's going to kick into high gear, which I kind of love. Yeah. And then it's thank you for letting us breathe. Now we can exile. Even though this is insane and incomprehensible action, I feel now we can take a breath, right?
Yeah, well, this is actually when things all of a sudden clicked back into place, and the story started to make sense for me again. So that was it. Yeah, so that was another kind of weird feeling to have happen, because I was prepared to just get to the end and be I had no idea what that was. But up to this point, there's enough of a story that I was able to piece together that I realized sort of what's happening now is this little girl who was set up to be the most vulnerable victim in the world is now taking out all of these ultimate evil villain badasses by herself, which
is great. I mean, this is amazing. This is where it's now, because that decision to me now is kind of changing a little bit of maybe my perception of the glue sniffing, well, I don't know, we'll get to that later, but I mean, because we still have to read his bio at the end of this thing, but right. Oh my God, this is amazing.
He sets it up really well.
He does. He really does. And it's unlike anything I've ever seen in any comic book I've ever looked at. Power comics especially. Imagine how a room full of superpowered mass murderers must feel when suddenly a little girl was consumed alive only moments ago is breaking their bones as easily as you might snap a twig. So boom, boom, boom. She's kicking everybody's ass, ripping people apart. Imagine how they must feel as she moves through them with the speed of a cheetah and the strength of 100 men. That's very Power Comics.
Mm-hmm.
So amazing. Of course, the action's not over. She's squaring off against more of these dudes. I love it. Every time you see one of these guys, it's a different new guy. There's like 800 guys in this comic. We haven't seen these people before. And then, of course, she's just like snapping one of their fingers off, like snap, you know. And then now she's like holding one of their fingers with like a little talon on it, and they're really upset. And then now she's got the talon, and she's going to town with the nail, cutting people open, ripping people's guts open. And this is what we paid to see, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I think there's a reference to Samson,
Yes,
right? Like,
yes,
which took me back to Torch. I was
yes.
like, oh, weird.
I know. Out of 4 episodes we've recorded for the show, 2 of them have Samson references. What does
Yeah,
that tell you
it's
about
really,
fucking Power Comics?
man, I don't know, but Samson is awesome.
I know. In the Bible, it says the meek shall inherit the earth. It is also written in the Bible that a powerful man named Samson used a donkey's jawbone, so to kill 1,000 Philistine soldiers. These criminals painfully find out that history can repeat itself. Weird reference as she's going through. Not what I would have thought if I were to come up with this scene, but clearly that's what he's thinking about. As we move through it, man, still happening, cutting people open, but then we kind of realize something's going on, and she's starting to kind of tear apart. As you can kind of see now, her face is kind of separating, right? Or catching on fire of some kind.
I don't really know. Yeah, something was happening, but I wasn't sure exactly
What
was happening to her. But
it says here, as her frail body finally succumbs to powers that can crush mountains into rubble. Again, another reference to that. He loves that. Or obliterate large cities. And then now they're all happy because she's losing her power. Like, yes, we got you. And she's catching on fire. That's what it is. Oh, yeah. And this is the most trippy part of the whole fucking thing, because now she's just a skeleton, but then she multiplies into tiny little skeletons of herself. This is, again, where the drugs are coming back on strong. Here's the relapse. And then all of a sudden, these little tiny skeleton versions of her are now attacking everybody, which is unreal, man. Like,
right, yeah. I mean, I always love like the power up when it's like the fuck you power up.
yeah, fuck you, power up, big time.
Yeah, so yeah, all these guys sort of think that they've got advantage, but they realize that they're actually under like tenfold of a threat now, like that she's multiplied and is even stronger, doing more damage.
It's amazing. It really is amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
From her charred remains emerge skeletal clones that quickly overwhelm the villains. That's underselling it. For years they have run amok, murdering and pillaging the innocent, but now that the chaos that they have caused for so many years is now consuming them. So maybe it's like some manifestation of all the bodies of people that they've tormented is now through this little girl and multiplying in skeleton form, which is just crazy. Why won't she die? So then they're all aghast here. Again, new people we haven't seen before. More new Cenobites for us to look at.
It's cannon fodder.
Unbelievable. And then suddenly they realize that among the bloody carnage, what they are witnessing is not chaos, but a birth. And that's when we reveal, for the first fucking time, on page 35 of this comic, that Dr. Leviathan is being actually born out of this thing, and that's who Dr. Leviathan is. Wasn't the little girl the whole time, which is kind of this weird switcheroo.
Yeah, he does a good job of setting up, the twists with the girl all of a sudden being, the predator, and then
the prey. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So going from prey to predator.
Yeah.
And then there's the twist where she multiplies into skeletons, and then this twist, which you've forgotten the title of this comic by this point.
Totally.
You're reminded, yeah, that it's Dr. Leviathan. This is why
we're
that? All here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he shows up. We've forgotten that that he's even supposed to be in this comic, I guess.
Yeah.
But we're witnessing, I guess, like an origin story, which is a great swerve. maybe it's not an origin story like his origin story,
Right.
but it's our origin story with the character, which is really
Yes.
satisfying.
Totally. And even I don't even understand what's happening here, where like one guy, as this guy's witnessing Dr. Leviathan being born, this one guy's like, no, and then he like rips open his stomach, like his bloated stomach, and it says, I am Dr. Leviathan written on it. So like, to try and parse the logic of that, is that like where someone's like, who are you, dude? Like, you're born amidst this chaos. And then is he just so powerful that he's able to like, just like have somebody like have that tremor within them that they're just like, oh, and then they open up their own stomach and he's able to write on somebody else's stomach? Is that what's happening? Because I hope that's what's fucking happening.
I think that's what's happening. And I think that panel of his straight face down
Here.
the bottom in the center, is just is the clue in that that's what's happening, that he is in control, that he is the one making this all happen with his mind, I suppose. It's great. That's a great idea.
It's so crazy. Like, who are you? And he's just like looks over at somebody, and then they're like, and then and then it's like written on their fucking stomach. Holy shit, James Matthew Banks Jr.
Good ideas.
So then here's the big reveal, where behind Dr. Leviathan, this door opens where the real Jessica is. So now this is, again, Dr. Leviathan can do some pretty freaky shit, we're learning here. And he's protected her and saved her all along because she was there at one point. So there was some sort of switcheroo that took place. And this is great, too, here from the back of Leviathan looking at, all these other Cenobite dudes. I know they're the lynchmen or whatever they're called, but Cenobites is just better. And then, then it looks like now we're cutting to another scene somewhere later in a small Midwestern city named Piqueta. A great evil is taking place. There is a small downtown apartment. Now we're in some small downtown apartment. 6 of the world's most powerful practitioners of black magic are only moments away from increasing their magic powers through this sacrificial ritual. So there's a sacrificial ritual happening. Oh, look, our homeboy's there. Maybe that's why he wanted the noise to be kept down. And Siege is there, and he's about to, perform some big black magic thing. Meanwhile, Dr. Leviathan has rounded up all of the Cenobites, and he shoved them into these little bags that are hanging from the fucking ceiling.
Super weird.
So weird. And then now obviously Siege is aware of it. Like, impossible. This is impossible. My men. What happened to my men? And he comes back and he sees them all fucking dripping from the ceiling. And and then Dr. Leviathan's like, yeah, what up? I did that. And yeah, his heart skips a beat as he is frozen by the sight of his colleagues being crushed against the ceiling.
Huh.
Drugs.
Right.
Drugs. Only drugs. And to be clear, drugs that you can buy at a convenient, like at like a hardware store. Yeah.
Walmart.
Yeah, this is like things that we haven't yet found that could be drugs. And then so then they have this big kind of, confrontation, but then again we're sort of seeing, more face pulling, which he loves. They kind of rip his face back, pull him there. And is this happening? Is this Dr. Leviathan doing this?
I think so.
It is, yeah. It's like some tendrils or something coming out of him or from him is like grabbing Siege here. And then I'm going to drag you somewhere over the sun. So now he's going to like take him by the fucking face and drag him over the sun. Man, this guy cannot get any more epic than he's gotten.
Yeah.
And then also, that's it.
Dr. Leviathan, man, he's
a bad dude.
He is. He can drag people across the sun. That is some pretty high level shit right there.
It is. Like all right, now I'm gonna fucking take you to the sun, my friend.
Yeah.
And it's just like, dude, what a crazy ass origin story. And speaking of origin story, now that we've wrapped this up, first, maybe before we transition to this unbelievable paragraph here, when you finish this thing up, when you're looking through it, I know going through it is so dense and so hard to figure out. Like you literally have to almost spend a week with this with nothing, no other distractions to properly decipher it. But what was going through your mind like after you kind of wrapped it up? If
I
you
was
recall.
really impressed. I mean, he tied the story up, and
That is true.
toward the in the middle, I just felt like that was not going to happen in any way. I was not expecting that. A lot of things in the comic are things that I didn't expect to happen.
Yeah.
Um, but it's no, it's a really strong comic. I really liked it a lot. I thought it was super entertaining, and the development of the character of Dr. Leviathan is only over like a few pages, but
Yeah.
you get a really good sense of like who he is, within the scope of the world of the comic. Like he's he's a bad dude. He's badder than the bad guys, but he's good enough to like save this little girl, or at least I don't know. He was probably just exploiting, you know, the situation, and she just happened to be somebody that he was able to save.
He's an avenger of some kind,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
he's definitely like a vigilante or somebody who's taking upon himself to rid this crazy world in the far future of these
Right.
guys, because he's doing so much to them and destroying all of them. It's interesting to see where this would go, and I have done some. I've done some Googling around, and I found that there is more Dr. Leviathan that he did release.
Wow.
So we do
Wow.
have to get our hands on that and find out what the hell happened after this point. But I think there is more, either more issues or he did like another collected work of it or something. But yeah, there is more of this story apparently. So, but
Amazing.
without further ado, you cannot talk about Dr. Leviathan without talking about this unbelievable autobiography moment here from James Banks Jr. So hello, I am James Matthew Banks Jr., the creator of Dr. Leviathan, and I hope that you've enjoyed this first issue. It's like, oh my god, like so underselling it. No man, like fucking given me nightmares for years. Dr. Leviathan is like so many other comic book characters that are extensions of the artist. So that's why I'm thinking something's going on here. That create them. Like them, he is a reflection of myself. Whoa, dude.
Right.
That I don't know what that means. The first time I started to develop the idea, this is where it gets amazing, of Dr. Leviathan was in the mid '80s. So again, going back to what we were saying, this was conceived at an appropriate time for us to cover.
Totally.
While I was working, so this was conceived in the mid '80s. While I was working on my job as a night shift manager in a grocery store, very on point. Right? Like, that's pretty
Yes.
perfect. I'm sure all power comic creators worked at a grocery store at one point in time.
No doubt.
I could have possibly published my comic book back then if I had spent more time developing it, but instead, I chose to hang out all night in nightclubs and party while chasing as many beautiful women as I could. Want to
So
come home
perfect.
and see my comics?
Right. Yeah.
I have always had the interest to do a comic book. Wow, what nightclubs? First off, is he go? That's why I was thinking that's what he was listening to, like slowed down nightclub music. This
Right.
is what he's doing, just like
Yeah.
stark naked, with all the
Totally.
windows blocked out. Um, I have always had as many beautiful women as I. Oh, sorry. I've always had the interest to do a comic book. While I grew up reading them, and they provided a place for my mind to escape to. So this man has a mind that cannot be controlled from the rest of the world's problems. I remember when I was a young child, I was sitting in front of the television. This is so weird. I was sitting in front of the television reading a few comic books and watching images on the TV of men dressed up like my toy soldiers. I tried to keep reading my comics, but I kept noticing that unlike my toy soldiers, these men were missing some of their arms and legs, and they kept talking about some place that they had just come from called Vietnam. So now you're thinking to yourself, let's do some Dr. Leviathan math here.
Yeah.
Okay? That means he was watching this on TV when he was a young kid, 4 or 5 years old. Vietnam's happening, right? So that would put him at being born in the mid 60s. Or sorry, yeah, probably 64,
Yeah.
65.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly when Vietnam ended.
72.
72. So, yeah, so if he's a little kid, then you could still remember this stuff. It's got to be at least 5.
So so this is anywhere between 1964 and 1967 ish, right?
Yeah.
And so that's that, right? Then the 80s happens. He's 20 something. He's fucking partying, and he's thinking, dreaming up fucking Dr. Leviathan crazy shit. And then he's like sits on that for 15, 20 years. So how old is this man when he puts pen to... This is drawn by a 45-year-old man?
Yeah, it doesn't look like it.
That is crazy. Right?
It doesn't look like it. Yeah, if and I can't see how that math is incorrect, just from an approximation.
Like he's 40. He's at least 40.
Yeah, at least 40. I mean, he's got to be way older than 4. I mean, I'm 43, and I definitely wasn't around to remember Vietnam.
So there you go.
Well, I'm 43 now. So what was I?
In all fairness, you would draw something like this now. Is that what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I would.
I'm not trying to take an age jab here. I'm just saying,
Right.
as a guy who conceived it, probably didn't make a comic book up until his first comic book, and he's like sitting on this, for this long, and then he's like, now's the time. I'm 45. Get those blankets, cover up those windows, break out the dusters. Like what?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny because I wonder if he was drawing a lot, honing his skills when he was in his teens and 20s, and then he must have stopped, and then he picked up a pen again to draw this. He was
chasing ladies. He says he's chasing ladies, man.
Yeah, right.
Ladies, man.
Understandable. Other pursuits come up. So,
yeah, life distractions.
Yeah. But yeah, it just feels like whatever he learned drawing as a teenager, he's now applying when he's in his 40s.
Okay. Yeah. I remember, and then I feel like we should finish what we started here. I
Sure.
remember as a young man, I tried to read my comic books to help take my mind off the suffering that my father was going through while he was dying of cancer. So again, heavy. Here's where the torment's coming. This is where the face chewing is probably finding its roots. I remember when I was 22 years old and I came home from the work, eagerly waiting to read a new batch of comic books that I had bought when I noticed the news on the television kept repeating, showing a space shuttle blowing up as it was taking off. So the Challenger, another clue. I think that was 1983 or 4, if I remember correctly. I remember reading piles and piles of comic books as I tried to forget about a young lady that I deeply cared for who lived a few hundred miles away in St. Louis. Today, I continue to read comic books as I try not to think about how our country, which was at one time tragically divided, well, you should come back to now, by what color a man's skin was, to now being sadly divided over the different ideologies of liberalism or conservatism. Now I'm putting Dr. Leviathan into the comic book universe. That to me says that he's starting at 2005, and I hope that as someone who reads my book, it will give them just some enjoyment and relief from their own tribulations. No, this is the craziest fucking. This is not escapism, my friend.
No.
Their own tribulations, just as comics have helped me through my own trying times. And he's thinking this is going to be therapeutic?
For him, maybe.
For him, not for us, which is a Power Comics trait.
True.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And then, of course, we had this amazing Dr. Leviathan thing here, which, again,
wow.
A tattoo I'm ready to get if you are.
Seriously, that is fantastic.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
That's great, skateboard heavy metal artwork right there.
It is. It really is. And you know what? And part of me was thinking just for a second, just to hear at the end of this episode, just to inject a little conspiracy theory into this whole thing. Is it a possibility that none of this is true? is it a possibility that this is a 20-something-year-old guy having a laugh at us, or do you think this is all legit?
I didn't think about. Now that you mention it, it's possible. I mean, when I was doing like author like photos and stuff in the back of my comics, I mean, you could tell that it was all farce, but like it was a fake thing to like create a character that was making this comic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe he's doing that sort of same thing. I mean, I could totally see it, but just the language rings so true.
I know
that I don't think that it's possible if it is like him sort of,
yeah.
If it is fictitious, then it's masterful.
Yeah, then he should be running Hollywood or something.
Yeah.
Like it crossed my mind a little bit just given the time frame we're talking about here.
Sure. Yeah.
But like clearly not, like, and then of course that, like the reference to chasing ladies in nightclubs, like at first had me being like maybe, but no, I mean it has to be. It has to be.
That's crazy.
Man, holy shit, James Matthew Banks Jr. Man, you made absolutely the craziest comic book I think I've ever read.
Yeah, it's an opus.
Yeah, it's incredible. And as much fun as I'm having here speculating on the backstory of this man, the origin story of the creator, I'm definitely having fun. But legitimately, if you're out there and you're listening, I love your work, and I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't want you to change a thing, Mr. James Banks Jr. Don't kill me. Don't gnaw on my face, like, Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Ben, for joining us for another Power Comics Book Club. Man, this is an epic one. I'm so glad we got to look at it. And holy shit, everyone out there, buy this comic, support this man, if anything. And I'm out of here, man. If you got anything else to say, if not, I'm out.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.